Some warnings are not meant to protect the people who hear them. They are meant to protect the people who ignore them. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from today. Leave your city or country in the comments below, because somewhere out there, someone else may be watching this with the same kind of ache in their chest. And if you believe loyalty is one of the rarest forms of courage left in the world, consider subscribing. This story begins with a warning people laughed at, and ends with a lesson nobody standing on that dock ever expected. The harbor at Port Aransas, Texas, glowed beneath the warm colors of a fading sunset. Fishing boats rocked gently against weathered wooden docks while seabirds circled overhead, their cries carried across the water by a salty evening breeze. Tourists wandered between seafood stands. Locals gathered near outdoor tables. Music drifted from a nearby restaurant. It looked like the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened. That assumption would prove very wrong. Olivia Brooks walked slowly along the dock with a German shepherd at her side. The dog moved with quiet confidence, his powerful frame attracting attention everywhere he went. His name was Rex. His coat shimmered black and tan beneath the evening light. His amber eyes remained alert, studying every sound, every movement, every unfamiliar face. People often noticed his size first. Those who paid closer attention noticed something else. Discipline, purpose, the kind that cannot be faked. Olivia wore simple jeans, a gray jacket, and a calm expression that rarely changed. She looked younger than most people expected, but there was a steadiness about her that made strangers hesitate before speaking. She had learned that calm often carried more power than anger. Years around soldiers, law enforcement officers, wounded veterans, and working dogs had taught her that the loudest person in a room was almost never the strongest. Real strength watched first. It listened. It measured the danger before anyone else even noticed the room had changed. Rex suddenly slowed near the end of the dock. Olivia noticed immediately. The German shepherd rarely reacted. Without reason. She followed his gaze toward a group of men gathered beside a charter boat. Loud voices. Too much confidence. The sort of people who mistook intimidation for strength. One of them pointed toward Rex and laughed. Another made a comment Olivia could not hear. The others followed with more laughter. She sighed quietly. Not because she was afraid. Because she was tired. People saw a dog and assumed they understood him. They saw teeth, muscle, a straight back, and trained discipline. They never saw the sleepless nights. They never saw the way Rex woke from dreams with a low whine in his throat. They never saw him stand at the harbor entrance in the rain, refusing to leave because one more set of headlights might be the right one. They never understood him. Most people did not try. Olivia continued walking. Rex remained beside her, focused but relaxed. Then one of the men stepped directly into their path. "That dog military?" he asked. Olivia stopped. "Yes." The man nodded toward Rex. "Looks dangerous." Olivia glanced at Rex. The German shepherd sat calmly beside her without being asked. Only when necessary. More laughter followed. Another man approached. Then another. The atmosphere shifted slightly. Not enough to alarm most people. Enough for Rex. His ears lifted. His posture changed. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Olivia noticed it immediately. So did the dog. She rested a hand lightly against his shoulder. The gesture seemed to calm him. Around them, the harbor continued moving as normal. Nobody else sensed the tension growing beneath the surface. One of the men leaned closer. What happens if somebody bothers him? Olivia looked directly at him. Her expression remained perfectly calm. Nothing good. The answer only encouraged more laughter. The first man shook his head. "Come on. It is just a dog." Olivia's eyes never left his. The breeze moved strands of hair across her face. Behind her, the sunset painted the water gold and orange. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then she delivered the words they would remember for a very long time. "This is your last warning." The laughter stopped. Not completely. Just enough. Something in her voice felt different. There was no threat in it. No fear. No anger. Only certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from knowing something other people do not. One of the men rolled his eyes. Another muttered something under his breath. They clearly believed the conversation was over. Olivia seemed to believe otherwise. She looked down at Rex. The German shepherd remained perfectly still beside her. Patient. Focused. Waiting. Then she turned and walked away. No argument. No confrontation. No attempt to prove a point. Rex followed immediately. Together they disappeared farther down the dock as evening shadows stretched across the harbor. Behind them, the group of men resumed talking, joking, laughing, completely unaware that the warning had never been about the dog. And as darkness slowly settled over the Texas coastline, a weathered pickup truck was already heading toward the harbor, carrying a man whose name Rex had never forgotten. The harbor lights flickered on one by one as night settled across Port Aransas. Reflections stretched across the dark water like ribbons of gold and silver, while fishing boats rocked gently against their moorings. Most visitors never noticed how different a harbor felt after sunset. The crowds thinned. The music softened. The sea seemed to reclaim the spaces people borrowed during the day. Olivia Brooks sat alone near the far end of the dock with Rex resting beside her. The German shepherd's ears remained alert even as he appeared relaxed. A cool breeze carried the scent of salt and diesel fuel through the air. For several minutes neither moved. They had shared enough years together to understand silence. Olivia reached into her jacket pocket and removed a small photograph. The edges had become worn from being handled too often. Rex immediately noticed it. His eyes shifted toward the image before returning to the water. Olivia smiled sadly. I know. The photograph showed a tall man standing beside Rex years earlier. White skin, broad shoulders, calm eyes, a faded German shepherd tattoo visible near his neck. Commander Lucas Hayes, former Navy SEAL combat instructor, former K-9 handler. The man Rex still waited for every evening. People at the harbor often assumed Olivia was the dog's owner. She never corrected them. It was easier than explaining the truth. The truth sounded impossible. Olivia was not Rex's owner in the simple way people meant it. She was his keeper, his guardian, the person Lucas had trusted when he left and promised he would only be gone a few weeks. She had taken that promise seriously long after everyone else stopped expecting it to matter. 5 years earlier, Lucas had disappeared after accepting a private security contract overseas. At first there had been phone calls, short emails, a few messages that sounded too calm to be honest. Then came silence. No official explanation ever followed. No clear answers. No closure. Olivia had called numbers that no longer worked. She had spoken to people who lowered their voices and said they were sorry but could not help. She had learned how cruel uncertainty could be when it wore the face of professionalism. Most people eventually stopped asking questions. Rex never did. Every night he returned to the harbor. Every night he searched the arriving vehicles. Every night he waited. Somewhere deep inside, the dog still believed. Olivia folded the photograph and slipped it back into her pocket. Maybe tonight, huh? Rex lifted his head. The sound of an approaching engine echoed from the distant parking area. The German shepherd stood immediately. Olivia followed his gaze. A weathered pickup truck rolled slowly into the harbor lot before stopping beneath a row of streetlights. Several fishermen climbed out. Rex relaxed slightly and sat back down. Not them. Never them. The disappointment lasted only a moment before he resumed watching. Olivia's heart ached every time she saw it happen. Across the harbor, the group of men from earlier remained gathered near the charter boat. Their laughter carried over the water. Every so often one of them glanced toward Olivia and Rex. The memory of her warning clearly amused them. One man raised a drink in mock salute. Another laughed loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Olivia ignored all of it. Rex did not. His eyes lingered briefly before returning to the parking lot. The dog understood. Something she rarely spoke about. Real strength did not waste itself proving a point. An elderly harbor worker approached carrying a coil of rope over one shoulder. He stopped beside Olivia and nodded toward Rex. Still waiting? Olivia smiled softly. Always. The man looked toward the German shepherd. That dog has more faith than most people I know. Then he walked on. The words lingered. More faith than most people. Maybe that was true. Nearly everyone else had accepted the possibility that Lucas Hayes would never return. Rex had never accepted it. Somewhere beyond the harbor, beyond the dark water and distant highways, a pickup truck traveled south along the Texas coastline. The driver kept both hands on the wheel. Country music played quietly through worn speakers. A faded military challenge coin rested in the center console. Beside it lay an old photograph with soft white creases across the corners. The driver had not visited Port Aransas in years. He had told himself he stayed away because he was protecting everyone from questions he could not answer. The truth was simpler and harder. He was afraid to learn that the life he remembered had moved on without him. Yet tonight something pulled him back. Back toward the harbor. Back toward unfinished promises. Back toward a German shepherd who still remembered. Olivia checked her watch. 9:30. The harbor would begin closing down soon. She stood slowly. One more hour. Rex immediately rose beside her. The dog seemed to understand the ritual better than anyone. One more hour. One more chance. One more arriving vehicle. One more glimpse of hope. Across the dock, the group of men finally began moving in their direction. Olivia noticed them immediately. So did Rex. The German shepherd's posture changed. Not aggressive. Not fearful. Alert. Focused. The harbor lights reflected in his amber eyes as the distance between them slowly disappeared. One of the men smiled. Another shook his head. They clearly believed the conversation from earlier had not ended. Olivia exhaled quietly. Somewhere far beyond the harbor entrance, headlights appeared along the coastal road. A single pickup truck moved steadily through the darkness toward the water. Neither Olivia nor the men noticed it. But Rex did. The German shepherd suddenly stopped looking at the approaching group. His ears lifted. His entire body became still. And for the first time that evening, hope returned to his eyes. The change in Rex happened so quickly that Olivia almost missed it. One moment the German shepherd was watching the group of men approaching along the dock. The next, every ounce of his attention shifted toward the distant entrance of the harbor. His ears stood tall. His breathing slowed. His entire body became still. Olivia followed his gaze. At first, she saw nothing except rows of parked vehicles beneath the harbor lights. Then she noticed the headlights. A single pickup truck moving slowly through the lot. The truck itself looked ordinary. Old. Weathered. The kind of vehicle nobody remembered 5 minutes after seeing it. Yet Rex stared at it, as though the entire world had suddenly narrowed to that one point. Olivia felt her heart begin to race. She had seen this reaction before. Not often. Not in years. The group of men continued approaching. Their laughter echoed across the dock. One of them pointed toward Rex. Another shook his head and smirked. They clearly believed they still controlled the situation. None of them noticed the truck. None of them noticed the way the German shepherd had stopped paying attention to them entirely. Olivia's eyes remained fixed on the vehicle. The pickup rolled into an empty space near the far end of the harbor and came to a stop. The engine shut off. Silence followed. For several long seconds, nobody stepped out. Rex did not move. He simply watched. Waiting. Hoping. The same way he had waited every evening for years. The same way he had searched every arriving vehicle. Every unfamiliar face. Every stranger who walked through the harbor gates. Most nights ended in disappointment. Olivia knew that. Rex knew it too. Yet somehow he never stopped believing. A cool breeze swept across the water. Dock lights reflected against the gentle waves. The group of men finally reached the area near Olivia. One of them spread his arms dramatically. There is the famous dog. Another laughed, still waiting for his superhero to show up. Olivia ignored them. Her attention remained on Rex. The German shepherd took one slow step forward. Then another. His tail remained perfectly still. His eyes never blinked. Something inside her chest tightened. She had seen soldiers reunited with military dogs before. She had seen families reunited after years apart. This felt similar. Yet she was afraid to trust it. Afraid to hope. Because hope could be cruel when it arrived too early. One of the men noticed her expression. What is so interesting? Olivia did not answer. The truck door finally opened. A man stepped out into the harbor lights. He wore a dark jacket, worn jeans, work boots. Nothing remarkable, nothing dramatic. Yet the moment his feet touched the pavement, Rex stopped breathing for half a second. Olivia saw it happen. The German shepherd froze completely. Time seemed to pause around him. The harbor noises faded into the background. The laughter disappeared. Even the distant music drifting from the restaurants seemed to vanish. There was only the dog and the man standing beneath the lights. The figure closed the truck door and looked toward the water. Then slowly, almost casually, he turned toward the docks. Olivia felt tears instantly gathering in her eyes. The years had added silver to his hair. The years had placed lines around his eyes. Yet she knew that face. She would have recognized it anywhere, even with the silver at his temples, the sharper cheekbones, and the tired carefulness of a man who had survived more than he wanted to explain. Commander Lucas Hayes. For several seconds, she could not move, could not speak, could barely breathe. 5 years. 5 years without answers. 5 years of rumors, questions, and silence. 5 years of watching Rex wait. 5 years of Olivia pretending she was strong enough not to hope, then driving him back to the harbor anyway, because she could not bear to be the person who made him give up. Lucas began walking toward the harbor. Unaware. Unhurried. The distance between him and the dock slowly disappeared. Rex remained motionless. One of the men near Olivia laughed again. What is wrong with the dog? Another shrugged. Maybe he finally got tired. Olivia never looked away from Lucas. No. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. The men frowned. What? This time she looked directly at them. Her eyes shimmered beneath the harbor lights. He found who he was waiting for. Confusion spread across their faces. Across the dock, Lucas stepped onto the wooden planks leading toward the water. His boots echoed softly against the boards. He still had not seen Rex. The German shepherd's breathing became uneven. Hope, disbelief, recognition. Every emotion seemed to battle inside him at once. Then Lucas finally lifted his eyes. Across nearly 100 feet of dock, man and dog saw each other. The harbor disappeared. The years disappeared. The waiting disappeared. And for the first time in more than 5 years, Rex looked like he remembered exactly where he belonged. For a moment, neither moved. The harbor lights reflected across the dark water, while the evening breeze carried the scent of salt and distant rain. Lucas Hayes stood frozen halfway down the dock. Rex stood frozen near Olivia. 5 years had passed between them. 5 years of unanswered questions. 5 years of waiting. Yet in that single instant, time seemed to collapse. The German shepherd took one slow step forward. Then another. His eyes never left Lucas. Around them, conversations faded. Restaurant music became background noise. Even the group of men who had spent the evening laughing now watched in confused silence. They did not understand what they were witnessing. Olivia did. Tears blurred her vision. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Some versions ended with disappointment. Others ended with heartbreak. None of them looked like this. Lucas finally exhaled. His shoulders lowered slightly. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Small. Genuine. The kind of smile that comes from seeing something you thought was lost forever. Hey, buddy. The words were barely louder than the wind. Yet Rex heard them. The German shepherd stopped walking. His ears lifted. Every muscle in his body trembled. Not with fear. Not with excitement. With recognition. Then Lucas took a step forward. That was all it took. Rex crossed the distance between them. Not wildly. Not recklessly. The powerful K9 moved with absolute purpose. When he reached Lucas, he stopped directly in front of him and simply stared. It was not the reaction people expected from a dog seeing a beloved handler after years apart. There was no wild jump, no barking frenzy, no chaos. Rex stood there as if he needed proof that the scent, the voice, the shape, and the memory all belonged to the same living man. The harbor became silent. Lucas slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Years showed in the movement. Stiff joints. Old injuries. Long miles. Yet his eyes never left the dog. You waited. Rex pressed forward. His head rested against Lucas's shoulder. A collective breath escaped from nearby onlookers. One of the fishermen removed his cap. Another looked away entirely. Even the men who had mocked Olivia earlier seemed unable to speak. The reunion carried a weight that words could not explain. Lucas wrapped one arm around Rex's neck. His other hand disappeared into the thick fur behind the dog's shoulders, gripping there like a man holding onto the edge of his own life. The German shepherd remained pressed against him, refusing to let the moment end. Olivia wiped away tears and finally approached. Lucas looked up. For a second, surprise crossed his face. Then recognition followed. Olivia. She laughed softly through tears. Took you long enough. Lucas stood and embraced her briefly. I know. The answer carried more meaning than either of them explained. Olivia heard apology inside it. She heard exhaustion. She heard the kind of regret that could not be repaired with one sentence, no matter how badly someone wished it could. The group of men exchanged nervous glances. The confidence they carried earlier had vanished. Only minutes before, they had treated Rex like entertainment and Olivia's warning like a joke. Now they were standing in front of the man who had trained him, lost him, and been found by him again. Suddenly their laughter seemed small, childish, and embarrassing. One of them cleared his throat. You know this dog? Lucas turned toward him. The harbor lights illuminated his face. Calm, controlled, unimpressed. I do. The man pointed toward Rex. Military dog. Lucas nodded. Former military K9. Another man stepped forward. Nobody said that. Olivia folded her arms. Actually, I tried. Silence followed. Lucas looked from one face to another. There was no anger in his expression. No threat. Somehow that made the moment more uncomfortable. Olivia told you to leave him alone. The men avoided eye contact. Nobody answered immediately. Eventually one shrugged. We were just joking around. Lucas glanced toward Rex. The German shepherd now sat calmly beside him, exactly where he belonged. A good rule, Lucas said quietly, is to listen when someone gives you a warning you did not earn. Nobody argued. Nobody laughed. The lesson landed harder than any confrontation ever could. The harbor worker from earlier approached slowly. Commander Hayes? Lucas smiled. Been a while. The older man shook his head in disbelief. Half the town thought you were gone forever. Lucas looked out across the water. The answer took a moment. So did I. More questions waited behind those words, but nobody asked them. Some stories deserve their own time. Some wounds had to be approached slowly, the way one approached a frightened animal, with patience, honesty, and both hands visible. For now, the only thing that mattered was the dog sitting beside him. Rex never moved more than a few feet away. Every few seconds his eyes drifted back toward Lucas as though confirming he was still there. Olivia noticed and smiled. He checked every truck that entered this harbor for 5 years. Lucas looked down at the German shepherd. Emotion flickered across his face. I know the feeling. The night grew deeper. Boats rocked gently against the docks. Harbor lights shimmered across the water. One by one, people returned to their conversations, though none of them spoke quite as loudly as before. Yet something had changed. The tension was gone. The waiting was over. The harbor, which had carried Rex's hope night after night, seemed to exhale with him. Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and removed a faded leather collar tag. He attached it carefully beside Rex's current identification plate. The metal caught the light. Guardian. Rex looked up immediately. Lucas smiled. Still are. The German shepherd's tail moved against the wooden dock. Slow. Content. Certain. And standing beneath the Texas night sky, everyone who witnessed the reunion understood something simple and powerful. Some warnings are not about danger. They are about respect. And some bonds do not weaken with time. They only wait for the right moment to come home. The harbor did not return to normal after that. People tried. Conversations restarted. Chairs scraped against wooden decks. Glasses clinked. Music drifted once more from the waterfront restaurants. Yet every few minutes someone glanced toward the far end of the dock, where Lucas Hayes stood beside Rex. The reunion had left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. Some moments do that. They remind people that loyalty is real. That waiting matters. That some promises survive longer than reason says they should. Lucas sat on an empty bench overlooking the water. Rex immediately settled beside him, pressed so close their shoulders touched. The German shepherd seemed determined to make up for 5 lost years in a single evening. Every time Lucas shifted position, Rex lifted his head. Every time Lucas looked away, the dog checked to make sure he remained there. Olivia watched quietly from nearby. She had imagined countless versions of this reunion. None of them captured the simple reality of it. No dramatic speeches. No grand explanations. Just a dog who finally stopped searching. Lucas rested one hand against Rex's neck and stared out across the dark Gulf waters. Harbor lights reflected in his eyes. The years had changed him. Olivia could see that much. The confident Navy SEAL instructor she remembered had become quieter, older, more thoughtful. Yet something remained unchanged. The calm certainty, the steady presence, the feeling that he always knew exactly where he belonged. An elderly fisherman approached slowly and removed his cap. Good to see you back, Commander. Lucas smiled. Good to be back. The man nodded toward Rex. He never quit on you. Lucas looked down at the German shepherd. I know. The fisherman hesitated. Then he walked away. There was nothing else to say. A few yards farther down the dock, the group of men from earlier remained unusually quiet. Their confidence had vanished. One of them stared at the water. Another studied his boots. Eventually, the tallest among them approached. Olivia immediately noticed. So did Rex. The German shepherd's ears lifted. Lucas gently touched the dog's shoulder. Instantly, Rex relaxed. The man stopped several feet away. "Look," he said awkwardly. "About earlier." Nobody spoke. The harbor breeze carried the scent of salt and diesel fuel between them. The man cleared his throat. "We did not know." Lucas nodded once. That much was obvious. Embarrassment crossed the man's face. He glanced toward Rex. "We should have listened." Olivia folded her arms, but remained silent. Lucas studied him for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. "That is usually what warnings are for." The man laughed nervously. "Fair enough." For the first time all evening, the tension disappeared completely. Not because anyone had won, because everyone finally understood. The man extended a hand. Lucas shook it. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Yet it changed everything. Respect replaced arrogance. Understanding replaced assumptions. Sometimes justice arrives quietly. Later that evening, after most visitors had gone home, Lucas and Olivia walked along the nearly empty docks while Rex trotted between them. The harbor had become peaceful again. Boats creaked gently against their moorings. Moonlight shimmered across the water. 5 years, Olivia finally said. Lucas nodded. 5 years. She looked at him carefully. "You owe me a story." A tired smile appeared on his face. "Probably. You owe him one too." Lucas glanced toward Rex. The German shepherd immediately looked back. His tail moved once. "Yeah," Lucas said softly. "I definitely owe him one." They continued walking. Ahead, the end of the dock stretched into darkness. Behind them, harbor lights glowed warmly against the night. Lucas stopped beside an old piling covered in weathered rope. He reached into his jacket and removed a folded photograph. The edges were worn. The image showed a younger Lucas kneeling beside Rex years earlier. Olivia recognized it immediately. "You kept that?" Lucas nodded. "Every day." Rex pressed closer as if he understood. Perhaps he did. Dogs often understand more than people realize. Lucas carefully showed the photograph to the German shepherd. Rex sniffed it once before resting his head against Lucas's arm. The gesture seemed almost human. Olivia felt tears threatening again. The waiting was over. The searching was over. Yet somehow the bond between them appeared stronger than ever. Above the harbor, stars filled the Texas sky. The sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Lucas slipped the photograph back into his pocket and looked down at Rex. "Ready to go home?" The German shepherd stood immediately. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Home was no longer a place. Home was a person. And as the three of them walked together beneath the harbor lights, none of them noticed the small crowd watching from a distance, smiling quietly as a loyal dog finally found what he had spent 5 years searching for. The drive away from the harbor felt almost unreal. For years, Rex had left that same place disappointed, sitting quietly in Olivia's back seat while the lights of Port Aransas slipped behind them. Tonight, he left with his head turned toward Lucas, watching every breath, every blink, every small movement of the man he had refused to forget. Lucas kept one hand on the steering wheel while the other occasionally drifted toward the passenger seat where Rex rested with his head lifted, unwilling to look away for more than a few seconds. The German shepherd seemed determined to make certain this was not another dream. Streetlights slid across the windshield as they left the waterfront behind. Port Aransas disappeared gradually in the rearview mirror. Olivia followed in her own vehicle several car lengths behind them. Neither she nor Lucas had spoken much since leaving the docks. Some reunions needed silence more than conversation. The road stretched along the coastline beneath a sky crowded with stars. Waves rolled somewhere beyond the darkness. The world felt calm again. Lucas glanced toward Rex and smiled. "You never did. Learn how to stop worrying." The dog's ears lifted immediately. His tail moved once against the seat. Lucas laughed softly. The sound surprised him. There had been years when laughter felt like something belonging to another person. Yet tonight it returned naturally. Familiar. Like an old friend finally finding his way home. An hour later they reached a small house overlooking a quiet stretch of shoreline. The place was simple. Weathered wood. A wraparound porch. Tall sea grass moving gently in the wind. Lucas parked beneath a floodlight and stepped out into the cool night air. Rex followed before the truck door had fully opened. The German shepherd paused in the driveway and looked around carefully. Every scent was new. Every sound unfamiliar. Yet Lucas stood beside him. That seemed to be enough. Olivia arrived moments later and joined them near the porch steps. For a while nobody spoke. They simply stood together beneath the stars while the ocean breathed beyond the dunes. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. So, are you going to tell me where you disappeared to? Lucas looked toward the water. The question had waited 5 years. He knew it deserved an answer, but answers had weight. They were not clean things. They carried names, mistakes, paperwork, governments, contractors, and choices made in rooms Olivia had never seen. Someday, Olivia folded her arms. That sounds suspicious. Lucas smiled. Probably. She laughed despite herself. Rex settled beside them, calm and content. The sight alone felt miraculous. The same dog who spent years staring toward harbor entrances now rested peacefully at the feet of the man he had never forgotten. Lucas unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Warm light spilled across hardwood floors. Framed photographs lined one wall. Military challenge coins rested inside a glass case. The house carried the quiet atmosphere of a life interrupted rather than abandoned. Rex entered slowly. He moved through each room with deliberate care, examining every corner, every scent, every memory hidden within the walls. He paused near Lucas's old boots by the mudroom, pressed his nose into a faded blanket folded over the couch, and stood for a long moment beside the hallway, as if comparing the house in front of him to the house he had carried in memory. Then he stopped near the fireplace. A photograph rested on the mantel. Lucas and Rex together years earlier. Both younger, both smiling. The German shepherd stared at it for several seconds. Then he sat. Olivia noticed immediately. He remembers. Lucas nodded. Dogs always do. Later that night, after Olivia finally headed home, the house grew quiet. Moonlight filtered through the windows. The ocean wind whispered against the porch outside. Lucas sat alone in the living room with a cup of coffee cooling beside him. Rex rested nearby. For the first time all evening, the German shepherd appeared tired. Truly tired. The kind of exhaustion that arrives only after carrying something heavy for too long. Not physical weight, but emotional weight. The burden of listening for a truck that never came. The burden of being told by every passing night that faith was foolish and choosing faith anyway. Lucas looked toward him. You can stop searching now. Rex lifted his head. His amber eyes reflected the firelight dancing across the room. Lucas smiled. I am here. The words settled gently into the silence. The dog lowered his head once more. Peace replaced vigilance. Acceptance replaced waiting. Somewhere after midnight, Lucas walked to the bookshelf near the fireplace and opened a small wooden box. Inside rested old photographs, training patches, and a faded collar tag identical to the one now hanging beside Rex's identification plate. Guardian. Lucas held it briefly before returning it to the box. The years had taken many things. Time. Friendships. Certainty. Yet somehow they had not taken this. The bond remained. Stronger than distance. Stronger than silence. Stronger than 5 impossible years. Lucas turned off the lights and prepared for bed. As he reached the hallway, he glanced back one final time. Rex had already fallen asleep near the fireplace. Not near the door. Not near the windows. Not watching the road outside. Sleeping. Truly sleeping. The sight stopped him in place. Emotion tightened his chest unexpectedly, because in that simple moment he realized the waiting was finally over. And somewhere beyond the darkness, beyond the miles and unanswered questions, a new chapter had quietly begun. Morning arrived slowly over the coastline. Pale sunlight filtered through the windows, while waves rolled gently beyond the dunes. For the first time in years, Rex was not waiting by a harbor entrance when dawn arrived. No one had to coax him away from the road. No one had to whisper, "Not tonight, buddy." No one had to watch his ears fall when another stranger climbed out of another truck. He was not scanning parking lots. He was not searching passing vehicles. He was home. Lucas woke to the scent of coffee and the distant cry of seabirds drifting across the shoreline. For a moment he remained still, staring at the ceiling, allowing himself to absorb a reality that still felt impossible. Then he heard it. Soft breathing beside the fireplace. He smiled before even looking. Rex remained asleep exactly where he had settled the night before. Peaceful, relaxed, unburdened. The sight carried more meaning than Lucas could explain. 5 years of waiting had finally ended. He moved quietly through the house and stepped onto the porch with a steaming mug in hand. The morning air carried traces of salt and seagrass. The horizon glowed gold where the sun touched the Gulf waters. It should have felt like an ordinary morning. Instead, it felt like a second chance. 30 minutes later, a familiar pickup rolled into the driveway. Olivia stepped out carrying a paper bag from a local bakery. Before she even reached the porch, Rex appeared at the screen door. His tail moved slowly against the floor. Olivia laughed. "Good morning to you too." Lucas opened the door and shook his head. "I think he missed you. Pretty sure he is just after the cinnamon rolls." Rex immediately proved her wrong by walking directly to Olivia and pressing his head gently against her side. The gesture lasted only a few seconds, but it said everything. Loyalty never divided itself. It simply grew. The three spent the morning together. They walked along the shoreline. They talked about small things. Harbor gossip, local weather, fishing boats, ordinary conversations that somehow felt extraordinary after years of uncertainty. Yet beneath every conversation waited the same unanswered question. Eventually Olivia asked it. They sat together on driftwood overlooking the water while Rex rested nearby. "Are you ever going to tell me what happened?" Lucas stared toward the horizon. The breeze moved through his hair. For a long time he remained silent. Then he nodded. "Probably time." Olivia listened carefully. Lucas spoke slowly. Not because the memories hurt, because they mattered. He explained how a private security mission overseas had gone wrong, how communication failed, how months turned into years, how one bad decision led to another. He described long roads home and complicated circumstances. He spoke of a contract that turned into captivity, of documents taken, names changed for safety, and months when every message he tried to send disappeared into the wrong hands. He did not make himself a hero in the telling. If anything, he admitted how many times fear and shame had kept him moving in the wrong direction. Yet through every detail, one thing remained clear. He never stopped thinking about Rex. Never stopped carrying the photograph. Never stopped hoping. Olivia's eyes softened. He never stopped either. Lucas looked toward the German shepherd. Rex sat watching the waves as though he understood every word. Maybe he did. Dogs understood loyalty better than anyone. Later that afternoon, they returned to the harbor. Not because they needed to, because they wanted to. The place looked different now. Familiar faces greeted Lucas with surprise and relief. Harbor workers shook his hand. Fishermen offered coffee. Even the group of men from that first evening approached again. This time there was no arrogance in their expressions, only respect. One of them crouched carefully beside Rex. "Good dog," he said quietly. Rex accepted the compliment with calm dignity. Lucas noticed something then. Nobody feared the dog anymore. They understood him. There was a difference. Fear looks at power and imagines harm. Respect looks at power and recognizes restraint. As the day passed, stories spread through town. The missing seal had returned. The waiting dog had found his partner. People smiled when they told it. Some stories reminded communities who they wanted to be. That evening, just before sunset, Lucas and Rex walked alone to the far end of the harbor. The same place where years of waiting had begun. The same place where it finally ended. The water glowed orange beneath the setting sun. Boats drifted gently against their moorings. Lucas stopped beside the railing and looked down at the dog. Rex immediately sat beside him. Familiar. Steady. Home. Lucas reached into his pocket and removed the old photograph. The one he had carried for years. He looked at it briefly before placing it inside a small waterproof frame mounted near the harbor office. A quiet memorial. A reminder. Not of loss. Of loyalty. Then he rested one hand against Rex's shoulder. The German shepherd leaned slightly into the touch. Neither needed words. The silence between them carried everything. The waiting. The faith. The years. The return. The sun slipped below the horizon. Harbor lights flickered on. And standing together beside the water, they finally understood something neither time nor distance had been strong enough to change. Some bonds are not measured by how long they last. They are measured by whether they survive being tested. And theirs had survived everything. The photograph on the harbor office wall became something unexpected. At first it was only a small frame mounted near the door, easy to miss unless someone was looking for it. Then someone left a folded note beneath it. Someone else placed a challenge coin on the ledge. A little girl taped up a drawing of a German shepherd with a crooked halo over his head. The harbor master pretended to complain about the clutter, but he never took any of it down. It was never meant to attract attention. Lucas had placed it there quietly, without ceremony, hoping only to honor the years Rex had spent waiting. Yet over the following weeks, people stopped to look at it. Fishermen paused before heading out to sea. Families visiting the waterfront asked about the German Shepherd in the picture. Harbor workers told the story to newcomers. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, the photograph became part of the harbor itself. One cool January morning, Lucas arrived at the docks carrying a toolbox while Rex walked beside him. The German Shepherd no longer searched every arriving vehicle. He no longer scanned every face. Instead, he moved with calm confidence, as though a weight he had carried for years had finally been lifted. The harbor greeted them warmly. A waitress from a nearby cafe waved from across the street. Two fishermen called Rex by name. Even the harbor master kept dog treats hidden inside his desk drawer. Lucas smiled at the sight. "Looks like you are more popular than I am." Rex glanced up briefly before continuing down the dock. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond them, silver beneath the winter sun. Life felt ordinary again, and after everything they had endured, ordinary felt like a gift. Around midday, Olivia arrived carrying a stack of folders. She found Lucas repairing a damaged railing near the end of the marina. Rex rested nearby in a patch of sunlight. "I have something you need to see," she said. Lucas wiped his hands on a rag and accepted the folders. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Some came from veterans, others from military families. A few were from complete strangers. Every letter told a different story, but they shared the same message. People had heard about Rex, about the years of waiting, about loyalty surviving uncertainty. One letter came from a retired Marine in Arizona, another from a widow in Ohio. A teenager from North Carolina wrote about how the story inspired him to reconnect with his estranged father. Lucas read silently while the waves rolled against the docks below. "I did not expect this," he admitted. Olivia smiled. "Neither did I." Rex lifted his head as though sensing the emotion in their voices. Lucas looked toward the dog and shook his head softly. "You have no idea what you did, do you?" The German Shepherd stood and walked over. He rested his head against Lucas's arm. The answer seemed obvious. No, he did not know. He had never waited for recognition. He had simply waited because he loved someone. The simplicity of that truth affected people more deeply than any speech ever could. In a world where people explained betrayal, excused distance, and dressed selfishness in clever words, Rex had done the one thing nobody could argue with. He had stayed loyal. A few days later, the harbor hosted a small community gathering. Nothing formal. No reporters. No cameras. Just neighbors sharing food and stories near the water. As sunset painted the sky orange and gold, the harbor master asked Lucas to stand beside the photograph. Lucas looked uncomfortable immediately. Public attention had never interested him. Yet he agreed. Rex sat calmly at his side while dozens of familiar faces gathered nearby. The harbor master cleared his throat. "Most people think this story is about a dog finding his handler." He smiled toward Rex. "I think it is about something bigger." The crowd listened quietly. "It is about loyalty. It is about keeping faith when there is no guarantee things will work out. And it is about remembering that some bonds are worth waiting for." The applause that followed felt warm and genuine. Lucas glanced down at Rex. The German Shepherd appeared far more interested in a nearby seagull than the attention surrounding him. The sight made Lucas laugh. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Lucas and Rex walked alone along the shoreline. The tide moved gently beneath the moonlight. Waves whispered across the sand. Lucas carried one of the letters in his pocket, the one from the retired Marine. He had read it at least 20 times. Eventually, he stopped walking and looked out toward the dark horizon. Rex settled beside him immediately. "You know," Lucas said quietly, "I spent years wondering whether coming back would matter." The German Shepherd listened in the way only dogs can. Completely. Without judgment. Lucas smiled. "Turns out I was asking the wrong question." He reached down and scratched behind Rex's ears. What mattered was coming home. The wind moved through the sea grass behind them. Stars filled the Texas sky. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead. And standing together beneath the moonlight, neither man nor dog felt the need to search anymore. They had already found what they were looking for. Spring arrived quietly along the Texas coast. The seagrass grew taller. The mornings became warmer. The harbor moved with its familiar rhythm of fishing boats, tourists, and gulls circling beneath bright blue skies. Yet for those who knew the story, something felt different. The old photograph near the harbor office remained in its place. Visitors still paused to look at it. Locals still shared the story. But the photograph was no longer about waiting. It had become a reminder of what happened when loyalty refused to surrender. On a calm Saturday morning, Lucas Hayes stood near the end of the dock repairing a weathered railing while Rex rested nearby beneath the shade of a wooden awning. The German Shepherd had changed. Not in strength, not in discipline, in peace. The restless searching had disappeared from his eyes. The endless scanning of arriving vehicles was gone. He no longer watched every stranger. He no longer carried the burden of wondering whether the person he loved would ever return. He knew Lucas was here. That certainty had given him something priceless. Rest. Olivia arrived carrying coffee and a small envelope. "Mail call," she said with a smile. Lucas wiped his hands and accepted it. The envelope came from a military veterans organization. Inside was an invitation. A ceremony. Nothing elaborate. Just a gathering meant to recognize service animals whose stories had inspired communities. Lucas read it once and laughed quietly. Rex is going to be famous. The German Shepherd lifted one ear, but remained focused on a seagull standing 50 feet away. Olivia smiled. "I think he already is." Later that afternoon, the harbor hosted another community gathering. Families filled the boardwalk. Children chased each other between food stands. Musicians played near the waterfront. The atmosphere felt warm and familiar. Lucas sat on a bench overlooking the water while Rex rested beside him. Every few minutes, someone stopped to greet the dog. Rex accepted the attention with calm dignity. He never demanded it, never expected it. He simply existed exactly as he was. And somehow people felt better around him. As sunset approached, the harbor master stepped onto a small wooden platform near the water. He tapped a microphone lightly. Conversations faded. Curious faces turned toward him. Lucas immediately looked uncomfortable. Olivia laughed because she knew exactly what was coming. "You are not escaping this one." The harbor master smiled toward the crowd. "Most people think heroes look a certain way." He paused. "Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do not." His gaze shifted toward Lucas and Rex. A while ago, this harbor became part of a story that reminded all of us what loyalty really means. The crowd listened quietly. Waves rolled against the docks below. The harbor master continued. One waited. One returned. Neither gave up. Applause spread across the waterfront. Lucas shook his head in embarrassment while Olivia laughed openly. Rex simply sat beside him, completely unaware that dozens of people were applauding his existence. The simplicity of that made the moment even more powerful. After the gathering ended and darkness settled across the harbor, Lucas and Rex walked to the far end of the dock one final time. The same place where Olivia had given her warning. The same place where waiting had finally ended. Moonlight reflected across the calm water. Fishing boats rocked gently against their moorings. The harbor felt peaceful, complete. Lucas rested both hands on the railing and looked toward the horizon. Rex sat beside him exactly as he had thousands of times before. Yet now everything was different. There was no uncertainty left. No distance. No missing years standing between them. Only the quiet understanding that comes after a promise survives its hardest test. Lucas reached down and touched the collar tag hanging beside Rex's neck. Guardian. The metal glimmered beneath the moonlight. He smiled. You never stopped, did you? Rex looked up. His amber eyes reflected the harbor lights. Then he leaned gently against Lucas's leg. The answer was obvious. No, he never stopped. The wind moved softly across the water. Somewhere in the distance a bell rang from a passing boat. Lucas stared out toward the dark horizon and felt something he had not felt in many years. Gratitude. Not for the years they lost. For the years they still had. Beside him, Rex rested peacefully. Home at last. And under the Texas night sky, where the sea met the stars, the harbor held one final lesson for anyone willing to listen. The strongest men do not seek revenge. They protect what is worth loving. The wisest people do not laugh at warnings just because they do not understand them. And the greatest dogs never forget where their hearts belong.